While the congregation said, "God bless you," my stepmother pulled me into the robe room and beat me until my back hit the wall. She left me trying to breathe. My cousin came over, handing me a napkin for the blood at the corner of my mouth, but inside was a note, a number, and 4 words that changed everything. She hid everything here. My name is Hayden Willis. I'm 32 years old, and in Maple Ridge, Ohio. People know me as the EMT lady. I'm the one who shows up when your grandfather collapses at the dinner table or your kid flips his bike into a ditch. I'm the calm voice in the chaotic dark. They call me Hayden, or that Willis girl who works the ambulance, always with a slight tilt of the head, a mixture of pity and respect. What they never call me, not in a way that matters, is daughter. Today, I was on duty at the place that specialized in that particular kind of forgetting, New Hope Fellowship. It was their big annual community open house, which meant the church leadership paid for a standby ambulance, just in case one of the elderly patrons got too excited by the free lemonade. And in our town, church leadership meant one person, my stepmother, Lorraine Willis. She was the head of the women's ministry, the finance committee, and the unofficial queen of Maple Ridge's moral high ground. Her entire life was a performance of perfect, gentle Christian motherhood. The service had just ended. The main doors burst open, spilling the congregation onto the manicured lawn, a wave of pastel dresses and stiff-collared shirts. People were shaking hands, laughing too loudly. "God bless you, sister. Praise the Lord for this beautiful day." Children in their Sunday best chased each other around the oak trees. It was a perfect picture, painted in bright, wholesome colors. And then there was me. I stood at the edge of the paved walkway, next to my rig, keeping a professional distance, my uniform, a standard-issue navy blue polo and tactical pants, felt loud and out of place. It was clean, except for one spot on the left sleeve, a dark, rust-colored smear that wouldn't come out in a quick sink scrub. It was from the call at 3 this morning, a domestic dispute that ended badly. The stain was a small, ugly piece of the real world, and it didn't belong in Lorraine's carefully curated scene. I saw her moving through the crowd before she saw me. Lorraine didn't just walk. She glided, a 50-something woman in a cream-colored linen suit, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. She touched an arm here, laughed at a joke there, her face a mask of serene warmth. Then her eyes found me. The smile didn't vanish, but it tightened at the edges. She handed her half-empty punch glass to a passing deacon and began her slow, deliberate path toward me. "Hayden, dear," she murmured, as she got close, her voice a low, honeyed hiss designed to sound like affection but land like a warning. She didn't hug me. She gripped my arm just above the elbow, her perfectly manicured nails digging in slightly. She positioned her body so that we were facing away from the main crowd, a practiced move of controlling the narrative. "You're causing a scene, Hayden." I looked around. No one was looking at us. "I'm on standby. Lorraine, this is my job." "Your job," she said, the word tasting like something sour in her mouth, her eyes fixed on my sleeve. "Is that blood?" It was a long shift. "You are an embarrassment." Her voice was still a whisper, but it was venomous. "We have new members here today, important members, and the daughter of the ministry leader shows up looking like she just crawled out of a gutter. With that vehicle," she gestured at the ambulance. "It's disrespectful. You are making a mockery of this family and this holy place." A familiar heat rose in my chest, the old childish impulse to apologize, to shrink, to make myself smaller. For years, that had been my only move. But something had shifted in the last few months, ever since I'd found the first letter from my father's estate lawyer, a letter she had clearly hidden. I kept my voice as level and cold as an IV drip. "Speaking of family, Lorraine, I've been meaning to ask, I know you got the certified letter from Mr. Henderson's office, the one about Dad's inheritance." Her grip on my arm went rigid. The pleasant, matronly mask cracked, just for a second. Her pupils dilated. "I don't know what you're talking about," she hissed. "The letter asking why the original will was never filed." I pressed on. my voice still quiet, still calm. "The letter asking about the community property trust. You've been ignoring his calls, so I thought I'd ask you directly. What exactly are you hiding?" "Lorraine?" Her smile was gone. It didn't fade. It snapped off, like a light switch. Her face, which moments ago had been all soft lines and grace, hardened into something sharp and ugly. "You will not speak to me that way," she snarled. Before I could react, she had me by the arm again, but this time it wasn't a grip. It was a yank. She pulled me, hard, off the walkway and toward the side entrance of the church, the one that led to the fellowship hall and the back offices. She was surprisingly strong, fueled by a sudden, terrifying rage. She pulled me past the kitchen, where women were cutting sheet cake, and shoved me through a narrow wooden door I barely knew existed. The door slammed shut behind us, the sound of it rattling the cheap stained glass insert, the noise of the crowd, the organ music, and the laughter was instantly muffled, replaced by a thick, oppressive silence. We were in the choir robe room. It was small, barely larger than a closet, and smelled of damp wood, old hymnals, and the faint, dusty scent of decades of sweat trapped in heavy polyester. Dozens of purple robes hung on racks, creating a claustrophobic forest. Lorraine let go of my arm only to shove me against the wall. The back of my head hit the wood paneling. "Who do you think you are?" she spat, her face inches from mine. This was the real Lorraine, the one I knew, the one who lived behind the cream-colored suits and the gentle smiles. "You are nothing," she seethed. "You are blue-collar trash, just like your mother was. You think because you drive that glorified taxi, you're somebody? You're a gnat, a burden. You are the girl who ruins every single Sunday lunch, every holiday, every time I try to build something decent." I just stared at her. My training kept me from flinching. I knew how to handle hysterical people. You stay calm. You watch their hands. "I asked you a question," I said, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. "About the lawyer's letter, about my father's will. Did he really change it to leave everything to you and Savannah? Or are you lying?" The word lying did it. It was like I had flipped a switch. Her polite, church lady control evaporated, revealing the raw, violent thing underneath. Her hand came up so fast I barely registered it. The slap was a gunshot in the small room. My head snapped to the side, my ear ringing, my cheek instantly on fire. "You ungrateful little bitch!" she screamed. She hit me again, a backhand this time, across the mouth. I tasted copper. She wasn't just slapping, she was hitting. She punched me in the shoulder, hard, then again, driving me back against the wall. She grabbed my arms and shook me, the robes on the rack rattling around us. "I built this life. I saved your father from his grief. I gave you a home. And you dare question me?" She shoved me, and I stumbled, catching my balance before I fell. The pain was sharp, blooming across my cheek, my shoulder, my back. But underneath the pain was a strange, cold clarity. I didn't raise a hand to stop her. I didn't cry. I just watched her. I watched this perfectly composed woman unravel. Her face twisted in a mask of pure hatred. I was documenting. I was assessing the scene. And I realized this was the first time I was letting it happen. The first time I wasn't trying to de-escalate, to soothe her, to apologize for an offense I hadn't committed. I was letting her show me exactly who she was. She was winding up again, her hand raised, her eyes promising more. When the door handle jiggled, Lorraine froze. The door creaked open, and a sliver of bright sunlight cut through the dusty air. My cousin, Brooke Alvarez, stood in the doorway, her face pale. Behind her, 2 other women from the ministry team peered in, their faces curious. "Lorraine?" Brooke asked, her voice tight. "Is everything okay? We heard—" In less than a second, the transformation was staggering. Lorraine's raised hand dropped. She let out a shaky, breathy laugh. She stepped away from me, turning her back to block their view, and busied herself by straightening a robe on the rack. "Oh, heaven's sake. Brooke, you scared the life out of me," Lorraine chirped, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She turned back to me, her eyes glittering with a deadly promise, and reached out to pluck an imaginary thread from my uniform. Hayden and I were just having a private chat. She had a thread, poor dear, all that running around, you know. The other women smiled, their suspicion evaporating. Of course, Lorraine was just being a loving mother. But Brooke's eyes didn't leave mine. She saw the blood at the corner of my mouth. She saw the red mark blooming on my cheek. She knew. Brooke had always known. She stepped into the room, forcing the other women to either follow or be rude. "Oh, Hayden," Brooke said, her own voice suddenly loud and bright, faking it just like Lorraine. "You look flushed. It's so hot out there after the service. Here." She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a crumpled white napkin. She stepped between me and Lorraine, blocking my stepmother's view for a critical second, and pressed the napkin into my hand. It was thick, and there was something hard folded inside it. Her hand closed over mine, her fingers squeezing tight. "Don't say anything," she whispered, so low only I could hear it. "Open it when you get home." "Brooke, what are you doing?" Lorraine snapped, her smile strained. "Just helping my cousin, Aunt Lorraine," Brooke said, stepping back. She gave me one last, meaningful look, and then turned to the other women. "Ladies, I think the coffee is ready to be served. Don't you?" She shepherded them out of the room, leaving me alone with Lorraine again. Lorraine didn't move. She just watched me, her chest heaving. She straightened her linen jacket, ran a hand over her perfect hair, and reassembled her mask. "We will finish this later," she whispered. She opened the door and stepped back out into the light, her face already composed, ready to receive praise for a service well done. I stood there for a full minute, the smell of wood and her expensive perfume filling my lungs. My cheek throbbed. My hand was clenched so tightly around the napkin that my knuckles were white. I walked out the side door, not back through the crowd. I went straight to the ambulance, my sanctuary. I got in, locked the doors, and sat in the driver's seat, the adrenaline making me shake. Slowly, I uncurled my fingers. The napkin was damp with my sweat. I unfolded it. Inside wasn't just a napkin, it was a small piece of paper, torn from a notepad, folded into a tiny, tight square. I opened it. The handwriting was rushed, jagged, written with a blue ballpoint pen. "Safety Deposit Box 214, First Riverbank. Ask me about 2010. I stared at the words. 214, First Riverbank, 2010. A safety deposit box, a specific year, a year I associated with nothing but muted grief and the heavy finality of Lorraine's presence settling over our house. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The cut on my lip was already swelling. The red handprint on my cheek was darkening. I realized, sitting there in the quiet of my ambulance in the church parking lot, that the siren I'd been hearing wasn't for a stranger. It was for me. It was a call that had gone unanswered for over a decade. I clenched the small piece of paper in my hand. The beating in the choir room wasn't just a random explosion of rage. It wasn't about a bloodstain or my disrespectful uniform. It was an act of pure, terrified desperation. Lorraine had hit me because I'd gotten too close to the one thing she valued more than her reputation. She was hiding something big enough to make her drop her holy mask and show her fangs. And Brooke, my quiet, overlooked cousin, had just handed me the key. The note in my hand was a burning coal. Ask me about 2010. 2010, the year I turned 17, the year my father, Daniel Willis, seemed to finally give up. The throb in my cheek pulled me back, but the memory was already taking over, pulling me from the ambulance in the church parking lot and dropping me back onto Willowcrest Drive. That house. It was a perfectly nice suburban split level, but to me, it was a museum dedicated to a family I was adjacent to, but never part of. The walls of the living room were a shrine to Lorraine's chosen lineage. There were dozens of photos, professionally framed. Lorraine and Savannah at Savannah's 6th grade graduation, both in matching pink, Savannah at her first ballet recital, a tiny, self-satisfied sprite. Lorraine and my father, him looking uncomfortable in a suit, her beaming as if she had personally invented marriage. There were almost no pictures of me. There was one, tucked away on a bookshelf in the downstairs den, a school photo from when I was 9, before my mother died, before Lorraine. I still had my baby teeth, and a hopeful, gap-toothed smile. I looked like a stranger. My father, Daniel, was a good man. I believed that. But he was a weak man. He was a man who craved peace at any cost, and the cost was almost always me. He saw the way Lorraine spoke to me, the way her eyes went flat and cold when I entered a room, but he chose to see it as female friction. He would pat my shoulder when I was upset and say, "Just try to get along. Hayden, she's just trying to run a smooth household." Lorraine never hit me when I was a kid. She was too smart for that. Physical bruises leave marks, marks that pastors and neighbors and my father might question. She specialized in a different kind of injury, the kind that didn't bleed. She treated me as unpaid staff. From the moment she moved in, I became her project in humility. That's what she called it. It meant I was the one who scrubbed the grout in the bathrooms while Savannah practiced piano. I was the one who prepped all the vegetables for Sunday dinner and then did all the dishes after. When the church had a potluck or a bake sale, I was the one hauling folding tables from the basement and wiping up spilled punch, while Savannah, in a new dress, was praised for her charming presence. Lorraine called it serving God. She called it a lesson. Savannah was the show pony. She got new clothes for every season. Dance lessons, voice lessons, the lead in the Christmas pageant. She was groomed for the spotlight. I was the stagehand. I was the one standing in the wings, holding the microphone cable so she wouldn't trip, stacking the chairs after the congregation left. Lorraine crafted the narrative and repeated it until it became truth. "Hayden is so good with her hands," she would tell the other church wives, which was her code for "she's the help," and in the same breath, "Savannah is just so good at being seen." I learned, very quickly, that the path of least resistance was silence. If I spoke up, I was being difficult. If I had an opinion, I was unladylike. If I cried, I was making a scene. So I stopped. I learned to blend into the beige walls, to make myself small, to not be a bother. New Hope Fellowship was her grandest stage. It was where she perfected her role as the model stepmother, the picture of Christian charity. She would tell anyone who listened how she had taken in her husband's grieving daughter, how it was a challenge, God's own test, but how she loved me as her own. Then we would get home. The front door would click shut, and her face would drop. She would criticize my rough manners, my unfeminine interest in science, the way I walked, the way I sat, all of it making the family look bad. And then came 2010, the year on the napkin. It was a Saturday night in October. The church was holding its biggest fundraiser of the year, a banquet to raise money for a new community outreach center. I, of course, was on the cleanup crew. I was 15, almost 16, and I had spent the last 4 hours scraping dried gravy off 50 plates. Lorraine and Savannah, who had been the gracious hostesses for the evening, were leaving. My father, who had been roped into giving a speech, was with them. They were going out for a celebratory dessert. "Hayden," Lorraine called out, her voice echoing in the empty fellowship hall. She was already by the door, her purse in hand. "Make sure you wipe down the coffee machines and lock the back door. Don't forget to take the trash to the dumpster." "Can't it wait until morning?" my father asked, his voice weak. "It's late, Lorraine." "Nonsense. Daniel, it's a lesson in responsibility," she said, not looking at him, but at me. "She's good with her hands, remember?" They left. I was alone in the big, dark church, the smell of stale coffee and industrial cleaner in my nose. It took me another hour. When I finally finished, I walked through the side office to grab my backpack. The door to the pastor's study, which was being used as a temporary office for the fundraiser, was ajar, and I saw something. Lorraine. She hadn't left. She must have sent my father and Savannah on ahead and doubled back. She was standing in front of the small, temporary safe they'd been using for the night's cash donations. She was pulling out a thick, white bank envelope. It was bulging. She didn't count it. She just looked at it for a second. A strange, tight smile on her face, and then slipped it into her large, expensive handbag. I froze. I should have backed away. I should have pretended I saw nothing. But I just stood there, watching her snap her purse shut. She turned and saw me. Her smile vanished. "What are you doing? Spying?" I finished cleaning," I stammered. "I'm just getting my bag." She stared at me, her eyes boring into me. I looked at her purse. She saw me look. "Go home, Hayden," she said, her voice flat. "And not a word. This is grown-up business." I ran most of the way home. When I got there, my father was in the kitchen, eating a slice of pie. "Hey, kiddo," he said, looking relieved. "You're done. Good. That's good." "Dad," I whispered, glancing up the stairs toward Lorraine's room. "I saw her, at the church. She took a big envelope of money from the safe, from the fundraiser." My father's face crumpled. He looked away, busying himself with his plate. "Oh, that's nothing. Hayden, it's for a trust fund." "A trust fund? For the community center?" No, he said, shifting. "For your future, for the kids. Just a family fund. Don't you worry about it. It's all accounted for." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's for your future." But he didn't say which child's future. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of voices. I crept to the top of the stairs. It was my father and Lorraine in the living room. Their voices were low, urgent, angry. "I just don't like it. Lorraine," my father was saying, "it's church money. It's donation money. It's designated..." "Daniel," Lorraine's voice was sharp, cutting. "It's perfectly legal. It's for community welfare, and our family is part of this community. Besides, they'll never check. The board trusts me, and it's for our children. Your child will benefit. Don't you want Savannah to have the best? Don't you want your daughter to be provided for?" Yes, but this feels..." "It feels smart, Daniel. It's what's smart. Now, this discussion is over." I went back to bed. A cold, sick feeling in my stomach, a sense of unease about money, about the church, about Lorraine, had started to form. But I was 15. I had no power. I had no voice. So I buried it, just like I buried everything else. 2 years later, when I was applying to colleges, I told my father I wanted to study biomedical engineering. I had the grades for it. I loved math and science. He seemed proud. Then he talked to Lorraine. That night, she sat me down at the kitchen table. "Hayden, we need to be realistic," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Engineering it's very academic, it's a lot of theory, and it's very expensive. Your father and we just don't think it's a good fit for your particular talents." She slid a brochure across the table. It was for the local community college's EMT certification program. "This," she said, tapping the glossy paper, "this is practical. It's hands-on. You've always been so good with your hands. This is a realistic solution for a child who isn't, shall we say, academically inclined. You can get a job, support yourself." She had convinced my father it was the right move. I was enrolled 2 weeks later. The first time I saved a life, really saved one, was our next-door neighbor, Mr. Henderson. He had a massive heart attack while mowing his lawn. I heard his wife scream. I was home, studying. I ran over, did CPR for 9 solid minutes until the ambulance arrived. I kept him going. He lived. At dinner that night, I was quiet, but I was proud. I had done something real. Lorraine noticed my mood. "You're very self-satisfied tonight. Hayden," my father chimed in. "She should be. She saved Jim Henderson's life today. Lorraine, right before the ambulance got there." Lorraine took a delicate sip of her iced tea. She looked at me over the rim of the glass. "That's nice, dear," she said. "But you should be careful. You should stand back and let the doctors handle those things. It's not good to get involved in other people's dramas." That's when I knew. That's when I truly understood. Even saving a life was, in her eyes, getting involved where I didn't belong. The only person who ever saw it, who ever treated me like a human being, was Brooke. She was my dad's niece, a few years older than me. She was quiet, like me, and always seemed to be on the margins of family events, watching, after a particularly bad Christmas, where Lorraine had accidentally forgotten to get me a gift. Brooke had texted me later, "She's a piece of work. Don't let her get to you. You're better than all of them." I had held on to that text for a year. The older I got, the clearer the picture became, in the eyes of Lorraine, and by extension, my father and the rest of the family. I was not a daughter. I was a problem to be managed. I was a prop to be used. I was free. Ethical labor. Wrapped in the language of God's will. I was not a person to be loved. I was a tool. I opened my eyes. I was back in my ambulance, in the church parking lot. The sun was starting to get low, casting long shadows. My cheek was a dull, throbbing ache. I touched the napkin, the paper inside now soft and damp. Ask me about 2010. Brooke, she had been there. She had seen something. She had been a witness not just to today's assault, but to the year it all began. The year Lorraine started to move the money. The year the smell of rot and dirty money first seeped into the foundations of our family and our church. The shift back at the North Line EMS station was a welcome shock to the system. My home. Sunday evening into Monday morning was always a special kind of chaos. My world wasn't pastel suits and polite handshakes. It was 3 a.m. calls. The metallic tang of blood on a linoleum floor. The smell of stale urine and cheap whiskey in a cramped apartment. It was the frantic, high-pitched crying of someone who had just watched a loved one collapse. It was the scream of the siren cutting through the quiet, sleeping town. My partner, Marcus Flynn, was already prepping the rig when I got back. My cheek still a dull fire. Marcus was a 10-year paramedic, a man built of calloused hands and a profoundly kind, weary heart. He looked at me, clocked the slight swelling on my cheek, and just nodded. He never pried. "Rough day at the family reunion?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Something like that," I said, my voice tight. "Well, you're here now," he said, slapping the side of the ambulance. "Let's go fix what's broken." Marcus was the one who told me, back when I was a rookie, "Hayden, we don't just fix bodies. We're fixing the worst day of someone's life. Remember that." I love this job. I love the honesty of it. In this truck, there was no pretense. There was only the problem, the protocol, and the outcome. Life or death. It was clean, in its own messy way. Lorraine, of course, despised it. She called me the ambulance girl. She told her friends I played with needles for a living. At church dinners, she would lament, "It's just not a clean job, you know? Not classy. Not the kind of thing you can talk about over a nice meal." To her, my uniform was a costume of the lower class. To me, it was armor. But today, the armor had failed. After the beating in the robe room, I had gone to the station bathroom. The handprint was a deep, angry red. There were darker spots blooming on my shoulder and upper arm where she had punched and gripped me. I pulled a long-sleeved undershirt from my locker and put it on under my uniform polo. The last thing a patient having a heart attack needs to see is their EMT covered in fresh bruises. It makes them nervous. Like always, I was prioritizing someone else's comfort over my own truth. We ran 3 calls: a diabetic shock at a gas station, an elderly woman who had fallen and broken her hip, a fender bender where everyone was screaming but no one was hurt. Routine. At 2 a.m., during a rare pocket of quiet, I sat in the station's break room, the fluorescent lights humming. The napkin Brooke had given me was in my pocket. A crumpled, sacred thing. I took out my phone. My fingers were shaking, but I typed out a text to Brooke. "We need to talk, tonight." I hit send. The reply came back almost instantly, as if she had been waiting, her phone in her hand. "Come to my apartment. As soon as your shift ends." I kept something from that year. I shouldn't have, but I did. My heart did a painful lurch. I kept something. The rest of the shift was a blur. The final bell rang at 7 a.m. I signed off on my charts, handed the rig over to the day crew, and walked out into the bright morning sun, my entire body thrumming like a plucked wire. Driving to Brooks, I kept hitting the steering wheel, a nervous, angry rhythm. My cheek had settled into a stiff, purple ache. Every rule I had ever been taught was screaming at me to stop. Family is family. Lorraine's voice, a constant echo in my head. We don't air our dirty laundry. What happens in this house stays in this house. For 32 years, I had obeyed that law of silence. It was the entry fee for my miserable place at the table. Now, I was driving across town to betray it. I was about to set fire to the only family I had, even if it was a toxic, rotten one. Brooke lived on the other side of Maple Ridge, the side Lorraine and her church friends pretended didn't exist. It was a neighborhood of old, two-story apartment buildings with sagging porches and window unit air conditioners. I parked my old Honda behind a beat-up truck and walked up to apartment 2B. Her apartment was the Auntie Lorraine. Where Lorraine's house on Willow Crest was a sterile, beige museum of expensive, uncomfortable furniture, Brooks was chaos. But it was alive. The small living room was overflowing with plants. Books were stacked in teetering piles on every surface, and the walls were covered in mismatched frames holding real, candid photographs, pictures of friends laughing, a blurry shot of a dog, a photo of her parents, my aunt and uncle, looking young and happy. It was messy and warm and real. She opened the door before I could knock. She was in a pair of old sweatpants and a t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Hayden," she said, her voice soft. She pulled me inside and locked the deadbolt. She just looked at me for a second, her eyes tracing the bruise on my cheek. "Oh, hey," she whispered, her eyes filled with tears, which made my own eyes burn. "I saw it," Brooke said, her voice suddenly fierce. "I want you to know, I didn't just see you looking flushed. I came around the corner just as she had her hand in your hair. She was trying to slam your head against the wall. The other women didn't see it, but I did. I saw the whole thing." "Brooke," I didn't know what to say. "I've been waiting more than 10 years for this," she said, wiping her eyes angrily. "For you to be ready, for me to be brave enough. I'm so sorry. Hayden, I'm so sorry I waited so long." "What did you keep?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "The note, 2010. What happened?" She nodded, taking a deep breath. "Sit down. I'll make coffee." "I don't need coffee. I need to know." She nodded again, a new, hard resolve on her face. She walked over to her bedroom closet and came back with an old shoebox. The brand name long faded. She sat on the floor across from me and opened it. It wasn't full of shoes. It was full of paper, old mail, folded notes, receipts, a time capsule. "I worked in the church office for a semester that year," she said, her hands sifting through the papers. 2010. I was in community college, and Lorraine, in one of her charitable moods, got me a job filing. She thought I was too stupid to understand what I was looking at. She just wanted a gopher. Her fingers landed on a sheaf of papers, held together with a rusty paperclip. She was right. I was stupid. I didn't get it at first, but I knew it felt wrong, so I started making copies. One copy of everything that seemed weird. I'd take them to the library and use the machine for 5 cents a page. She pulled out a single, photocopied document and handed it to me. My hands were shaking. It was a bank statement. At the top, in clear, typed letters, it said, First River Bank, New Hope Fellowship Community Fund. Trustee, Daniel Willis. "That was the original fund," Brooke said. "The one your dad and the first pastor set up, way before Lorraine. It was for community aid. People who lost their jobs, widows, medical bills. That's what people thought they were giving to every Sunday." I scanned the page. The balance was healthy, in the 6-figure range, and then I saw the line items, a series of transfers. Transfer to account. Transfer to account. Regular. Every single month. Starting in June of 2010. Where did the money go? I asked. Brooke handed me another piece of paper, another photocopy. This one was a statement for a different account. Willis Family Legacy Fund. Trustee. Lorraine Willis. She set it up the month after she strong-armed the board into making her co-trustee of the community fund, Brooke whispered. She was siphoning it, draining the Lord's money directly into her own legacy. I remembered. It's for your future. My father's shifty eyes. Don't you want Savannah to have the best? I saw her fight with Mr. Abernathy, the old treasurer, Brooke said, her voice urgent, the memory fresh. It was in the parking lot, after a finance meeting. I was smoking a cigarette I shouldn't have been smoking, hiding behind the dumpster. He was livid. He said, "Lorraine, the donations were 10% higher than projected, but the account is lower." And she laughed at him. She told him, "Walter, you just need to re-sign the papers to make it all legal. It's just a restructuring." He resigned 2 weeks later. I felt sick. I looked down at the numbers. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Drained. "But hey," Brooke said, her voice dropping even lower. "That's not the thing. That's not the thing I kept that matters." She reached back into the box. This time, she pulled out a long, legal-sized envelope. It was folded in half, the paper yellowed and soft at the creases. "About a month before all that," she said, "before the transfers started, your dad came to our house for dinner. My mom, his sister, was still alive. He was happy. Happier than I'd seen him in a long time. He and my mom were talking in the kitchen, and he pulled this out. He was proud of it. He told my mom, 'I finally did right by Hayden. I made sure she's taken care of, no matter what Lorraine wants.'" She handed the envelope to me. I unfolded it. It was thick, stapled in the corner. "Last will and testament of Daniel Willis." My breath hitched. I read the first page. It was dated January 2010. I flipped to the section on bequests. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, landing on the words, "I devise and bequeath my primary residence at 412 Willow Crest Drive, Maple Ridge, Ohio, to my daughter, Hayden Willis. I devise and bequeath the full contents of my savings and retirement accounts, held at First River Bank, to my daughter, Hayden Willis. A sum of $25,000 to be set aside for my stepdaughter, Savannah." I read it again and again. The house, the savings, everything. He had left it to me. "But," she said, I couldn't speak. Lorraine said he changed it. She said he left everything to Savannah. She said he was so grateful for how Savannah cared for him at the end. She said he changed it in the hospital. "He showed this to my mom in January. Hayden," Brooke said, her eyes locked on mine. "He was so proud of it. He told my mom he was giving her a copy, just in case Lorraine tries anything, my mom. She put it in her own safety deposit box. When she died, I found it. I kept it. I don't know if it's the legal one, but it's the one he wanted." I looked at the forged, polished signature of my father at the bottom, Daniel Willis. Lorraine had been lying for the last 5 years, since my father died. She had been living in my house. She had been spending my inheritance, and she had funded it all by stealing from the church. The napkin Brooke gave me today, it wasn't just a warning, it was a weapon. It was a call to arms. Brooke was watching me, her face a mixture of fear and relief. "This is big. Hey," she said. "This isn't just family drama anymore. This is the church, her reputation, all of it." I looked down at the 2 documents in my lap, the old, true will, and the fresh, jagged note. Safety deposit box 214. Ask me about 2010. The box at the bank, the one Brooke's note mentioned. It wasn't my father's. It was the Willis Family Legacy Fund box. It was where Lorraine kept her secrets. I placed the original napkin on the table, next to the yellowed will. The pieces were slotting into place, forming a picture so ugly and so clear, it took my breath away. The beating in the choir room. It wasn't an opening shot. It was a desperate, last-ditch effort to stop a surgical investigation that had already begun. Lorraine hadn't been trying to silence me. She had been trying to stop a hemorrhage. And in doing so, she had just handed the scalpel to the one person who knew exactly where to cut. I left Brooke's apartment with my father's real will in my hand, my knuckles white. The air outside was cold, but I was burning from the inside out, in my world. When I arrive on a scene, the first thing I do is establish a baseline, triage. What's bleeding now? What's broken underneath? What can wait? I drove to a 24-hour drugstore, went to the office supplies aisle, and bought a simple, black spiral-bound notebook and a pack of pens. I sat in my car under the humming orange light of the parking lot. I opened the notebook. On the first page, I wrote the date, and then, Beaten in Choir Room by L. On the next page, I transcribed the note. Safety Deposit Box 214, First River Bank. Ask me about 2010. On the pages after that, I started a patient history. I wrote down every memory, every phrase Lorraine had ever used about money. God provides. Your father and I believe in a legacy of faith. The Lord rewards those who serve him. I wrote down the memory of the envelope in 2010. I wrote down the name Willis Family Legacy Fund. It was the most critical chart I had ever written. The patient was my past. The diagnosis was theft, and the poison was Lorraine. The next day, I called in a favor. Marcus, my partner, had used a lawyer a few years back when a drunk driver T-boned his truck and then tried to sue him. Jenna Klein, Marcus had told me over coffee one morning. She's not a bulldog. She's a surgeon. She doesn't just bite. She dissects. I needed a dissector. I took a personal day and drove 40 minutes to the city, to a small, professional office building. Jenna Klein's office was on the 3rd floor. It wasn't grand. It was functional. She specialized in civil litigation, with a focus on estate disputes and, interestingly, nonprofit and charitable trust fraud. She was in her 40s, sharp, and wore a simple dark pantsuit. She looked at the fading, yellowish-purple bruise on my cheek, then at the file I placed on her desk. She didn't coo. She didn't offer sympathy. She just pointed to the chair. Talk. I talked for 30 minutes, uninterrupted. I laid out my story, sticking to the facts, the way I would give a report to an ER doctor, the beating, the napkin, Brooke's copies of the bank statements, the yellowed, folded will my father had given my aunt. When I finished, she steepled her fingers and looked at me. This is a hell of a story. Hayden, if even half of this is true, your stepmother has likely committed embezzlement, fraudulent conveyance, and a profound breach of fiduciary duty. She picked up the will. But I need you to understand something. Your feelings are irrelevant. Your pain is irrelevant. What you know is irrelevant. In a courtroom, the only thing that matters is what we can prove. This, she tapped the will, is a good start. The bank statements are better, but it's not enough. Thus began what I came to think of as the slow rescue. In my ambulance, I have minutes, sometimes seconds, to stop a bleed or restart a heart. The law, I learned, operates on a different timeline. It's not a sprint. It's a slow, agonizing C-section. Jenna began the paper trail. She filed official requests for probate court filings in my father's name. She sent requests for the board meeting minutes from New Hope Fellowship dating back 15 years. She prepared to subpoena bank records. Your world is about acting fast, she told me over the phone. My world is about waiting. We have to wait for them to respond. If they ignore us, we file a motion to compel. We wait again. You have to be patient. Let the poison work. The first small miracle came a week later. Jenna Klein, she said, her voice crisp on the phone. I have news. We've pulled every probate filing in Daniel Willis's name for the last 20 years. The will Brooke has, the one from January 2010, was never officially filed with the court. My stomach dropped. So, it's useless? No. Hayden, pay attention. It's the opposite. What I also didn't find was any other will. There is no new will. The one Lorraine has been waving around, the one where she and Savannah get everything, it doesn't exist, at least not in the eyes of the state. It was never filed. It was never entered into probate. I was standing in my kitchen, my heart hammering. What does that mean, Jenna? It means, she said, and I could hear the faint smile in her voice, that the 2010 will, the one you're holding, is the most current, legally binding expression of your father's intent that we have. It means Lorraine has been, for all legal purposes, squatting. She's been living in a house and spending money that, according to this document, belongs to you. She's not the executor. You are. The next stop was the Napkin, Safety Deposit Box 214. Brooke and I went to the first riverbank. We knew we couldn't just walk in and demand access. We tried a different approach. I brought the original will, the one Jenna had reviewed, and my father's death certificate. I'm Hayden Willis, I told the woman at the new accounts desk. I'm the executor of my father's estate, Daniel Willis. We're trying to finalize his assets and believe he may have had a safety deposit box here. The bank manager, a nervous man named Mr. Davies, was called over. He looked at our papers. I understand, Ms. Willis, but due to privacy laws, I cannot confirm or deny the existence of a box held by a deceased client without a court order. We were stonewalled. I looked at Brooke. She was already giving up, but I was used to this. You don't ask a question once. You rephrase. Then I'm not asking as his executor, I said, shifting tactics. I am here as a representative of my attorney, Jenna Klein, investigating the assets of the New Hope Fellowship Community Fund as a concerned member of the congregation. His eyes widened. That was a different kind of trouble. I pulled out my phone and said, or I can have Ms. Klein call your legal department directly. I'm sure she'd be happy to. I was bluffing, but he didn't know that. Let me see what I can find. He stammered. He typed for a long time. His face went pale. He cleared his throat. I cannot find any box under the name Daniel Willis or the New Hope Fellowship Community Fund. However, I can confirm that Safety Deposit Box 214 is an active box. My blood went cold. Under what name? He looked at his screen. It is registered to a private trust, the Willis Family Legacy Fund. The only authorized trustee with key access is Lorraine Willis. Brooke's note was a direct hit. How do we get in? Brooke asked, her voice shaking. Mr. Davies looked relieved to be on firm ground. Only Ms. Willis, as the sole trustee, can access that box, or a direct court order. We walked out of the bank into the bright, cold air. Brooke was vibrating with rage. Let's do it. Hayden, let's get the court order. Let's kick it open. No. I said it so firmly it surprised even me. What? Why not? It's right there. Because I'm an EMT, I said, thinking fast. If I have a patient with a suspected spinal injury, I don't yank them out of the car. I stabilize. We wait. If we move on that box now, we give her a warning. She'll know we're coming. She'll move everything. She'll shred every piece of paper she has. We don't bust open the door. Brooke, we wait for her to open it for us. I was thinking, the slow rescue. What was the next step? The treasurer, I said. You said she argued with the treasurer, Walter Briggs. Yeah, Brooke said. He retired right after that, 2010. Lorraine told everyone he had a nervous breakdown. Poor man, just couldn't handle the stress of the Lord's work, she'd say. Where is he? It took Jenna's office 2 days. Walter Briggs wasn't in a mental hospital. He was at the Oakwood Meadows Assisted Living Center, the expensive one. We went on a Thursday afternoon. The place smelled of antiseptic and overboiled vegetables. We found him in a communal sunroom, staring blankly at a game show. He was a wisp of a man, his body lost in a baggy flannel bathrobe. Mr. Briggs? I said gently. He flinched. His eyes were milky and terrified. I don't... Are you from the church? He whispered. No, sir. My name is Hayden Willis. This is my cousin, Brooke Alvarez. Willis? His hands began to tremble. Daniel's girl? Yes, sir. I don't talk about the church, he said, turning back to the TV. I'm retired. I'm not well. We're not here to talk about the church, Mr. Briggs, I said, kneeling so I was at his eye level. We're here to talk about Lorraine. He went rigid. She beat me, Mr. Briggs, I said, my voice low and steady. Last Sunday, after the service, in the choir room, because I asked her about my father's will. I watched his hand, the one holding the remote, shake so hard the remote clattered to the floor. She hit you? He whispered, his eyes filling with tears. Yes, and now I have a copy of my father's real will, and I have bank statements showing her moving money from the community fund to her legacy fund, back in 2010. She was a force, he mumbled, rocking slightly. I'm just an accountant. I like numbers. The numbers didn't add up. He was back there, in his memory. She made me do it. She came to the finance meeting. She had all these lawyers. She said the community fund was stagnant and inflexible. She wanted to merge it with her new Willis Family Legacy Fund to be more agile in helping the needy. She promised it would all go to the poor. She had the pastor on her side. They all signed. What did you sign? Walter? Brooke asked, her voice soft. The merger papers. I gave her control. And then the report stopped. She wouldn't show me the books. She said I was fussy and lacking faith. I told her I was going to the board. And a week later, I had my breakdown. She paid for me to come here, to be quiet. He was weeping now, quiet, gasping sobs. Walter, I said, putting my hand on his arm. She can't hurt you anymore. We need your help. We need the proof. I was so scared, he said. But I wasn't stupid. He reached for his walker and slowly, painfully, pulled himself to his feet. We followed him to his small, neat room. He went to his desk and fumbled in the back of a drawer filled with mismatched socks. He pulled out a small, silver thumb drive. Before I retired, he said, his voice stronger, before they locked me out of the system, I backed up my own files, the ledgers, from before the merger, and for about 6 months after, before she changed all the passwords. He pressed the USB drive into my hand. His skin was cold, but his grip was surprisingly strong. I tried to tell Daniel, he whispered, but he was already so sick, and she was always there. He looked at me, his eyes finally clear. If you're really Daniel's daughter, if you're the only one who still cares about the truth, you use it right. Don't let her win. I left the nursing home, the small piece of metal feeling as heavy as a defib machine in my pocket. This was it. This wasn't a photocopy. This wasn't a memory. This was the data. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I went to the station, to the empty locker room. I pulled out my personal laptop. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the drive into the port. The drive loaded. There was one file. NCHF Ledgers 2009-2010 Final. I opened it. It was a simple spreadsheet, but it was the ugliest, most profane thing I had ever seen in my life. Column A, donations. Column B, date. Column C, transfer out. Column D, destination account. I watched, line by line, as the money flowed. The Sunday offering plate, the Widow's Mite Fund, the bake sale for the homeless shelter. I watched it all, in neat $2,000 and $5,000 increments, flow from the New Hope Fellowship Community Fund directly into the Willis Family Legacy Fund. Lorraine hadn't just stolen from me. She hadn't just stolen from my father. She had robbed the entire congregation. She had stolen from the poor, from the sick, from the faithful. She had stolen from God. And as I sat there in the humming silence of the locker room, I realized this wasn't just about my inheritance anymore. I was no longer fighting for a house. I was fighting for every single person who had ever dropped $1 into that offering plate, believing they were doing good. Lorraine hadn't just started a family war. She had declared war on the entire town, and she had no idea that I was the one who was about to send her the bill. Walter's USB drive burned a hole in my laptop bag. I spent the next 2 days of my off-rotation locked in my apartment, cross-referencing the spreadsheet with a decade of my own painful memories. The pattern wasn't just clear, it was grotesque. It was a perfect, terrifying echo. March 2011. A transfer of $7,000 from the community fund to the legacy fund. The reason code on Walter's spreadsheet just said, Disbursement General. I checked my old phone calendars. That was the week Lorraine had the entire roof of the Willow Crest house replaced. I remembered it because I'd had to help move all the furniture to protect it from the potential leaks. December 2012. A massive $15,000 transfer. 2 weeks later, Savannah, who had just turned 16, drove up to the Christmas Eve service in a brand new white Lexus SUV, the one with the big red bow Lorraine had parked in the pastor's spot. I remembered Lorraine, beaming on the platform, giving her testimony. The Lord has provided, she chirped, her eyes shining with unshed, pious tears. We tithed faithfully, and God rewarded our family with this blessing for our dear Savannah. The congregation had applauded. They had just paid for it. On and on it went. Every blessing, every miracle, every time Lorraine stood up and proclaimed how God had financially provided for her family, it corresponded, almost to the day, with a major withdrawal from the fund meant for widows and people who couldn't pay their electric bills, Savannah's private college tuition, the new deck, the mission trip to Hawaii, which was just Lorraine and Savannah at a resort for 2 weeks. She hadn't just stolen the money. She had stolen it and then weaponized it as proof of her own righteousness. I called Walter at the nursing home, my voice shaking with a new kind of rage. Walter, it's Hayden, the spreadsheet. It's all there. He was quiet for a moment. That's not all, he said, his voice frail. Before your father, before he passed, he came to see me, right here. He sat in that chair you sat in. My father? He came to see you? Yes, Walter whispered. He seemed haunted. He said he'd made a terrible mistake. He said Lorraine had gotten her hooks into the church and that he'd been weak. He asked me if I could help him. He said he wanted to change the signatory on the community fund back. He said he wanted to dissolve the legacy fund. He wanted to fix it. He said Lorraine. She kept putting him off. Delaying the paperwork, he said. He looked so tired. What did you tell him? I told him I was just a retired old man, that I had no power. I told him he needed a lawyer. He nodded. He said he would, right after the big Spring Forward fundraiser. A cold, hard stone dropped into my stomach. The Spring Forward fundraiser? Walter, when was this? I don't know. A week or so before he died? Yes, that was it. The last time I ever saw him, he said Lorraine was too busy with her guests from Atlanta to discuss it right then. But he was going to, as soon as it was over. Then I heard he was gone. I hung up the phone. My father had tried to fix it. He had tried to stop her, right at the end. And then he had his heart attack. The hospital where I work, where I take my patients, is the same one where my father died. I know the people in medical records. I know the charge nurse in the ER, Linda, who's been there for 20 years. I called her. Linda, it's Hayden. I have a strange and personal request. I didn't have to push hard. I was one of her own. I told her I was handling a dispute with my father's estate and needed to confirm the exact timeline of his admission. An hour later, a PDF was in my secure work email. Daniel Willis, admitted. I read his chart. As an EMT, I read dozens of charts a week. I know the language. I know the shorthand. And when I saw the note, my breath stopped. It was in the initial assessment from the admitting ER physician. Patient unresponsive on arrival. CPR in progress by EMS, per family. I scrolled down to the paramedics' intake notes, a crew I knew, good medics, and then The physician's summary. Significant anoxic delay. Patient presents with symptoms consistent with a major coronary event. Per wife, Lorraine. Patient first complained of severe chest pain at approximately 11 a.m. Wife states she prayed with him and gave him water. No call to 911 was placed for. I had to read it 3 times. No call to 911 was placed for an estimated 3 hours and 40 minutes. 3 hours and 40 minutes. Below it, the doctor had typed a single, damning line, delayed transport. Family hesitated to call 911. I pulled up the New Hope Fellowship Church calendar for that year. I found the day, April 12th, annual Spring Forward fundraising luncheon. 10:00 a.m., 3:00 p.m. Guest speakers from Atlanta Ministry Partners. He had his heart attack at 11 a.m. The luncheon was at its peak. Lorraine's biggest event of the year. She had her out-of-town guests. She was on stage. She was collecting checks. A call to 911 would have been a scene, an interruption. It would have ruined her performance. The dark, monstrous suspicion that had been forming in the back of my mind solidified into a horrific, undeniable truth. Lorraine hadn't actively killed my father. She hadn't put a pillow over his face. She had done something so much colder. She had let him die. She had stood by, listened to him complain of chest pain, and had consciously, actively chosen her reputation, her party, her fundraiser, over his life. She had prayed with him, she had given him water, and she had let the clock run out while his heart starved of oxygen. I thought I was going to be sick. I called Brooke. I could barely speak. Hayden, hey, what's wrong? You sound... What is it? She let him die. Brooke. I read her the medical report. I told her about the fundraiser. There was a long, terrible silence on the other end of the line. Then a gasp. Oh my God, Brooke whispered. Oh my God. Hayden, I remember that day. What? What do you remember? I wasn't at the luncheon. I was working. But I remember driving past the church in the afternoon. I saw the ambulance, your dad's ambulance. And I remember Lorraine. She was in the parking lot, crying. Crying? Not just crying, wailing. She was holding on to Pastor Caleb, just sobbing. God is testing us. He's testing our faith. Why is this happening? And there were people all around her, the guests from Atlanta. They were all patting her shoulder, telling her how strong she was. I pictured it, the ambulance, lights flashing, the medics working my father, knowing it was too late, and Lorraine, not with him, not in the ambulance, but in the parking lot, surrounded by her audience, turning her husband's death into another one of her goddamn performances. Brooke, I said, my voice flat, dead. She was putting on a show. The report says he had the heart attack at 11 a.m. The call didn't come in until almost 3 p.m. He was already gone by the time she was crying in the parking lot. He was lying on the sofa, dying, while she was hosting. As an EMT, I know what those minutes mean. Time is tissue. That's the first thing they teach you. With a heart attack, every minute you wait, more of the heart muscle dies. With a stroke, the brain dies. 3 hours. She hadn't just delayed. She had ensured there would be no recovery. She had ensured he would never make it to that lawyer's office. He would never change the will. He would never expose her. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. This wasn't about a house or money. This was about a cold, calculated, negligent homicide, dressed up in prayer and a linen suit. And then, Brooke's voice came back, shaking. Hayden, there's something else. Something I never told you. What? It's Savannah. A few weeks after your dad. After the funeral. She was at a party. I still have the text. I heard her fumbling with her phone, scrolling. She was drunk. She sent it to our cousin, Kyle, and he showed it to me. I took a screenshot. I don't know why. It felt so wrong. She was quiet for a second. Okay, I found it. She wrote, Mom is finally getting the new kitchen. And if Dad had gone sooner, we would be in the new house by now. LOL. God's timing, I guess. I closed my eyes. If Dad had gone sooner. They knew. Savannah knew. She knew that her mother's entire financial plan, their new house, their new kitchen, their legacy, was entirely dependent on my father's death. They hadn't just watched him die. They had been waiting for it. They had treated his life as a variable, a barrier to their next blessing. I called Jenna. I told her everything. The ledgers, Walter's story, the medical records, the delayed call. She was quiet for a long time. Hayden, she said, and her voice was grim. This is catastrophic, morally, but I need you to be a surgeon now, not a wrecking ball. We will probably never be able to get a DA to press criminal charges for delayed call. It's too hard to prove intent versus panic or stupidity. She will claim she was praying, that she didn't understand, that she was scared. It's a non-starter, criminally. But Jenna, she let him die. I know, and we will use it. In the civil case? In front of the church board? It's a character assassination. It's the story that destroys her. It proves her motive for suppressing the will. It proves her motive for everything. But we have to be smart. What do I do? You keep going. You're the EMT. You've assessed the scene. Now you're gathering intelligence. Start talking to them. To Lorraine, to Savannah, but not as an accuser, as a daughter. Tell them you want to reconcile. Tell them you want to heal. Put your phone on record and let them talk. People like this, they're arrogant. They'll brag about what they did. If you just let them. So I did. I started my reconnaissance. I bought a small, high-quality digital voice recorder. I sent a text to Savannah. Hey, I know things have been weird. Can we get coffee? I miss my sister. Before I could, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Is this Hayden Willis? The voice was smooth, deep, and familiar. This is she. Hayden, this is Pastor Caleb Ross. I almost dropped the phone. The head pastor of New Hope, Lorraine's boss, her spiritual shield. Pastor Ross, hello? I'm calling. I've heard some whispers, he said, his voice a low, concerned purr. Just some chatter that you're feeling, unsettled about some family matters. I've always thought of you as part of our flock. Hayden, even if you've been distant, I'd love to just buy you a cup of coffee, as a friend, to talk. It was a summons. He was Lorraine's fixer. I'd like that, Pastor, I said, my voice perfectly calm. We met the next day at the town's only non-chain coffee shop. He was exactly as I remembered. Tall, handsome in a bland way, wearing a perfectly pressed shirt. He paid for my coffee, his smile never wavering. Hayden, he said, stirring his own cup, your stepmother. She's a pillar of our church, a true woman of God. I know families. They have friction. This is more than friction, Pastor, I said. I know you're digging into the past, he said, his smile tightening. And I just want to caution you, as your pastor, the church, New Hope. We don't like scandal. It distracts from the Lord's work. Whatever disagreements you have with Lorraine, I'm sure they can be settled, quietly, as a family. Does the Lord's work include embezzlement, Pastor? His spoon clattered against his cup. He hadn't expected me to be so direct. That's a very strong word, Hayden. I have a USB drive, Pastor, from Walter Briggs. It shows every dollar she moved from the community fund to her private legacy fund, for years. Caleb's face didn't change, but his eyes did. The smile was gone. It wasn't shock I saw, it was annoyance. It was the look of a man who knew about the mess and was just angry that someone was threatening to pull up the carpet. He didn't look surprised. He looked implicated. He sighed, a long, put-upon sound. He stood up, pulling his wallet out. He was done. It was good to see you, Hayden, he said, his pastoral warmth gone. He started to walk away. Then he stopped and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small business card and a pen. He scribbled something on the back. He walked back and slid it across the table, making sure no one saw. "I wasn't pastor here in 2010, he said, his voice a low whisper. "But I inherited the situation. I've heard the stories." He tapped the card. "If you really want to know what happened that year, if you really want to know who signed off on the merger, stop looking at the official minutes. Ask about the private meeting, the one they held in the basement. There's no paper trail, but people remember." He walked out. I flipped over the card. On the back, he had written 2 names, Arthur Vance, June Gable. The church hadn't just been robbed, they had been complicit. They had been co-conspirators. This wasn't just about Lorraine. This was the whole damn system, and I was about to set it on fire. I understood then that emotional revenge was a tantrum. It was easy. It was what Lorraine did in the choir room. Yelling, screaming, hitting. It was a loss of control, a messy, biological reaction. That wasn't justice. That was just noise. My revenge would be a procedure. It would be clinical, as calm and irreversible as an intraosseous line. I wasn't just going to make her feel pain. I was going to make her, and everyone who enabled her, face the consequences of a diagnosis they had all ignored. I met with Jenna and laid out the new evidence. Walter's ledgers, the medical records, the fundraiser timeline. She didn't just let him die. "Jenna," I said, my voice flat. "She scheduled it." Jenna sat back, her face grim. "This is no longer just an estate dispute. Hayden, this is systemic fraud. We're beyond my pay grade. We need to trace the money, and for that, we need a specialist." She brought in a man named Owen McClure. He was a forensic accountant, a small, quiet man in a rumpled suit who looked more like a birdwatcher than a shark. He didn't care about the beating. He barely reacted to the 911 call delay. He just wanted the spreadsheets. "You're the trauma expert," he said to me, his fingers already flying across a calculator. "I'm the autopsy expert. I just follow the blood, which in this case is the money." He and Jenna worked for a week, while I worked my shifts at the station, my stomach in a cold knot. I continued to play the part of the beaten child. I sent a text to Lorraine. "Still preying on what you said. I'm sorry for upsetting you." She replied 4 hours later, "The Lord's grace is for those who seek it humbly. Hayden." She thought she had won. She thought the physical violence had put me back in my box. It was the deadliest mistake she could have made. Owen called for a meeting the next Tuesday. Jenna, Brooke, and I sat in Jenna's conference room. Owen put a single, large flowchart on the screen. "Here's the problem," he said, pointing his laser. "The money didn't just go from the community fund to the Willis Family Legacy Fund and stop. It was a washing machine. From the Legacy Fund. She paid for Savannah's tuition. She paid off the Lexus SUV in a single $30,000 wire transfer. She paid for her retreats." "We knew that," Brooke said, frustrated. "Yes," Owen said. "But you didn't know this." He clicked, and a new box appeared on the chart. Willis Ridge Properties, LLC. "What's that?" I asked. "That," Owen said, "is the legal owner of 412 Willowcrest Drive, your father's house." Jenna sat up straight. "It's not in her name?" "No," Owen said, a small, proud smile on his face. "She was smarter than that. In 2011, shortly after she gained full control of the funds, she had the house transferred out of your father's estate and into this new Shell LLC. She's the sole signatory." "So she owns it," I said, the hope sinking. "Ah," Owen said, "but how did the LLC buy the house? It took out a mortgage, a very large, very strange mortgage, and I spent 3 days digging through bank filings to find out who the lender was. It wasn't First River Bank. It wasn't a standard lender." He clicked again. The final line appeared on the flowchart, connecting everything. "The loan for the house, the mortgage that Willis Ridge Properties holds," he said, "was collateralized by the full and total asset value of the New Hope Fellowship Community Fund." The room was silent. I didn't understand. Jenna did. Her eyes were wide. "My God," Jenna whispered. She bet the church's money on her house. Owen nodded. She didn't just steal the money. Hayden, she leveraged it. She took the entire community fund, which Walter's ledger puts at over $700,000 at the time, and used it as the guarantee for a private loan to buy her own home. This means the church has been on the hook for her mortgage for over a decade. Spell it out for me, Owen, I said, my voice thick. If we prove the community fund was used improperly, which we can, he said, the entire collateralization is fraudulent. The loan gets called, the house, Willis Ridge Properties, forfeits. The house is sold at auction to repay the fund. She doesn't just lose her reputation. She loses the house. She loses everything. This was it. The thing she feared most. Not shame, not prison, eviction. While Jenna and Owen built the legal case, Brooke went to work on the moral one. She was the perfect spy, the quiet, overlooked cousin. She started with the names from Pastor Caleb's card, Arthur Vance and June Gable. She visited June Gable, an elderly widow who now lived in a small, subsidized apartment, the same one Lorraine had refused to help her get. June told Brooke everything. The private meeting in the basement, it wasn't a church meeting, it was an ambush. Lorraine had served coffee and cake. She had cried. She had talked about Daniel's failing health, about the inflexible old bank rules. She'd pitched the Willis Family Legacy Fund as a rapid response ministry. She made us feel like we were honoring Daniel by giving her control. June wept. She said it was to help his family, to help his legacy. We all signed. Arthur Vance, me, we signed it. Brooke's next move was brilliant. She didn't spread rumors. She started asking innocent questions. She organized a small get-well visit for Walter Briggs at the nursing home, and she invited a few of the church's oldest members, the matriarchs. As they sat in that bleak, antiseptic room, they talked about the good old days, and Brooke said, "Walter, I was just remembering that old community fund. Whatever happened to that? It helped so many people." The dam broke. June Gable, there in the room, told her story. Another woman, Mrs. Davies, chimed in. I asked for help. After my husband lost his job at the mill, I just needed 1 month's mortgage. Lorraine, she met me in the lobby. She said the fund had been restructured. She told me to pray on it. She handed me a pamphlet. She told me the fund was dissolved, another woman said, her voice sharp. But that can't be right, Brooke said, her voice a perfect imitation of confused innocence. That was the same year she got her new roof, wasn't it? And Savannah's car? And her trip to, where was it? The Holy Land? It was Hawaii, June Gable whispered, her face pale. She called it a spiritual retreat. The temperature in the room dropped. These women, the pillars of the church, the ones who ran the bake sales and counted the tithes, they were doing the math. I understood it. As an EMT, I know crowd psychology. A single person can bleed out quietly, but if a whole group sees the same massive hemorrhage, they are morally obligated to intervene. They've been ignoring the chronic symptoms for years. They needed an acute shock, a moral cardiac arrest. We started preparing the paddles. We built the dossier, a clean white binder. Jenna wrote the legal summary. Owen created a simple, devastating flowchart that showed the money moving from the offering plate to Lorraine's mortgage. We included a copy of my father's real will, a notarized, typed statement from Walter Briggs, a list of every blessing Lorraine had claimed, cross-referenced with the dates of her withdrawals. We take this to the district attorney, Jenna said, her hands on the finished binder. This is a locked box. Hayden, it's criminal. Let the state handle her. I shook my head. No, not yet. You said it yourself. Jenna, Lorraine will claim she was praying. She'll say it was a misunderstanding. She'll get a high-priced lawyer, and this will disappear into a courtroom for 2 years. No, she used the church as her stage. I'm going to use it as mine. I want her to face the people she robbed. I want them to see her face when she lies. Jenna looked at me, a long, calculating stare. That's a high-risk procedure. Hayden, you could lose the patient. I'm not the patient anymore, I said. And I'm not the EMT, I'm the surgeon. And this is an amputation. I was at the station, late, running through the plan in my head. I was exhausted. Marcus found me in the break room at 3 a.m, staring at a blank wall. You look like you're about to code one yourself. Willis, he said, handing me a scalding hot, terrible cup of coffee. What's wrong? And don't give me that family stuff crap. This is that bruise, isn't it? The one you had a few weeks ago? I looked at him. I'd been a lone wolf for so long. I'd forgotten what a partner felt like. I trusted him with my life, every single shift. It was time to trust him with this. It's my dad, Marcus. The day he died, I pulled the records. I think my stepmother let him die. She waited. She waited almost 4 hours to call 911. Marcus, who had been leaning against the lockers, stood up straight. He went very, very still. What day? He said, his voice flat. April 12th, 5 years ago. Daniel Willis, he said. It wasn't a question. My blood turned to ice. How do you know that? Hayden, he said, his voice raw. I was on that call. I was the paramedic. Your dad. He was my call. I couldn't breathe. What? What do you remember? Marcus? Tell me. I remember, he said, and his eyes were dark. I remember it was a bad call. We got dispatched for chest pain, possible unconscious. We get there, and the house is... It's not a panic scene. It's weird. It's clean. There's food everywhere, like a party. And this woman, your stepmother, she's all put together, crying. But it's all for show. And your dad? He's on the sofa, and he's cold. Hayden, cold. He's been down a long time. We worked him, Marcus continued, his voice rough. We tubed him, started compressions. But we knew it was a recovery, not a rescue. And I remember my partner, Rick, asking her, Ma'am, why? Why did you wait so long? And she just kept crying about God's will. He paused, scrubbing a hand over his face. But that's not the part. When we were packing our gear, she was in the kitchen with the other one, the blonde daughter. Savannah. Yeah, and Savannah was crying, hysterical, and I heard her. I heard her yell at your stepmother. I told you to call, I told you. And your stepmother, Lorraine, she grabbed her, and she said, I'll never forget this. She said, You be quiet. Don't you call 911 yet. It's not ready. My heart stopped. What? It's not ready? Yeah, it's not ready. I thought she meant the house. Or, I don't know what she meant, but it was the coldest thing I've ever heard. We wrote it up. Delayed call, scene chaos, but I never forgot it. It's not ready. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a new, terrible understanding. Hayden, if you need me to say that, in a room, in front of people, I'll be there. I'll put my hand on a Bible and I'll say it. I had my witness. I had my data. I had my moral imperative. I went home. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, looking at my arms. The bruises were gone. The yellow-green shadows had faded, but I could still feel them. I could feel the print of her fingers on my arm, the sting on my cheek. I promised that faint, fading memory. You will not be for nothing. You are the first line of my report. You are the evidence that started this. You are the reason the world is about to change. I practiced, not what I would feel, what I would say. I practiced like I was practicing pediatric intubation, calm, precise, no wasted motion. My name is Hayden Willis. My father was Daniel Willis. For 15 years, you have been giving money to the community fund, and for 15 years, Lorraine Willis has been stealing it. I practiced the line that mattered. This is how your faith was turned into her personal bank account. Brooke called me that evening, her voice electric. It's on? Hey, The year-end Thanksgiving and gratitude meeting. It's not a service, it's a town hall. The entire congregation is invited to review the year's blessings. It's next Wednesday. Lorraine is the keynote speaker. She can't control the crowd. She can't shut it down. It's the perfect stage. I looked at the white binder on my table. The paddles were charged. I looked out my apartment window, toward the dark skyline. Miles away, I could just see the white, illuminated steeple of the New Hope Fellowship, a single, toxic spike. "Okay, Brooke," I said. "That's the one." I hung up. I looked at that steeple. This time, I thought, New Hope is going to mean something, just not for her. The church fellowship hall was unrecognizable. Someone had tried to turn the cavernous beige room into a winter wonderland. White string lights were draped from the acoustic tile ceiling, and overly decorated Christmas trees stood in every corner, smelling faintly of plastic. It was the year-end Thanksgiving and gratitude meeting. Lorraine was in her element. She stood on the portable stage in a deep red suit, a poinsettia pinned to her lapel, her face glowing with righteous success. She was the MC, the star, the benevolent queen. "And so," she was saying, her voice amplified by the microphone, "we look back on a year of unprecedented blessing. Our financial strength is a testament to your faith. God has been so good to New Hope, and especially to your leadership families, who work tirelessly in His service." I sat in the 10th row, dead center. I wasn't wearing my uniform. I was in jeans, a dark gray sweater, and my old work boots. On my lap, I held the white binder, thick and heavy as a tombstone. To my left, Brooke sat. Her hands clenched so tightly in her lap, her knuckles were white. To my right, Marcus, in a clean flannel shirt, looking profoundly uncomfortable but absolutely solid, his arms crossed over his chest, my silent, unwavering support. On stage, Pastor Caleb stepped up to the lectern. He had the nervous, strained smile of a man about to perform a high-wire act with no net. "Thank you, Lorraine, for that wonderful summary," he said, shuffling his papers. He began to talk about the budget, but his words were vague. A cloud of charitable activities, community outreach, and ministry partnerships. The New Hope Fellowship Community Fund, the original, plundered fund, was never mentioned. He was hoping, praying, that no one would ask. He rushed through his part and handed the microphone back to Lorraine, visibly relieved. "Thank you, Pastor," Lorraine beamed. "And now, for my favorite part of the evening, our time of testimony, a chance for you, our community, to share your gratitude. Who has a word of thanks for what the Lord has done this year?" An older man in the front row stood and talked about his new grandson. A woman in the back talked about her successful surgery. The room was warm, sleepy, full of polite applause. "Wonderful, Sister Beth, just wonderful," Lorraine said, scanning the crowd. "Do we have one more? One more word of gratitude?" I raised my hand. It wasn't an aggressive gesture, just a simple, calm lift, but it was as effective as a gunshot. The polite chatter stopped. Heads turned. I saw the whispers start. "That's Daniel's girl, the one who drives the ambulance." I watched Lorraine, on the stage. Her smile froze. The blood drained from her face. She knew, in that instant, she knew this was not a social call. Her eyes darted to Caleb, then back to me. Her hand, the one holding the microphone, began to tremble. She was trapped. She had just invited testimonies of gratitude from the whole congregation. To deny me, in front of everyone, would be a scene. She licked her lips. She gripped the mic stand. "Hayden, dear," she said, her voice a strained, brittle thing, a thin layer of ice over a dark, cold ocean. How lovely, our Hayden. Do you have something you wish to share about your gratitude this year?" I stood up. I felt Brooke's hand brush my back. I felt Marcus shift in his seat. A silent, "I'm right here." I walked down the central aisle, the binder in my hand. I could feel every eye in the room on me. I didn't look at Lorraine. I walked up the short, carpeted steps to the stage. When I reached her, I didn't take the microphone she was weakly holding out. I walked past her, to the second microphone, the one on the stand by the lectern. I took the mic out of its holder, and I did not face the stage. I did not face the pastor or my stepmother. I turned and faced the congregation. I faced the 150 people, the old women, the young families, the widows, who she had robbed. My gaze was steady. My hands were not shaking. I was on a call. This was my patient, the entire dying community. I knew the protocol. "Good evening," I said. My voice, amplified, was calm and clear. It didn't waver. "My name is Hayden Willis." I paused. I let them see me. I let them remember who I was. "I am grateful, tonight," I began, my voice even, "for this community, for my job, which lets me serve you, but I am most grateful for something that happened right here, in this church, a few weeks ago. I'm grateful for a paper napkin." The room was in a state of absolute, confused silence. "You see," I continued, "my cousin Brooke gave me that napkin after my stepmother, Lorraine, beat me in the choir room, right after the Sunday service." A collective, audible gasp swept the hall. It was a physical thing. Lorraine let out a sound, a strangled, "No!" She lunged for me, her mask of piety shattered, her face a snarl of pure rage. She was going to grab the mic. "Lorraine, don't!" Pastor Caleb hissed. Grabbing her arm, he was terrified, his face slick with sweat, but he was smart. "If you cut her off now," he whispered, his voice low but desperate, "they will believe every single word she says. You stand still." Lorraine froze, trapped in her role, her face a mask of warring fury and panic. I hadn't flinched. I just held my ground. I looked back at the crowd. She hit me because I asked her a question I have been waiting 15 years to ask. I asked her about the money. I held up the white binder. "I'm an EMT. I'm not a public speaker, so I'm just going to report my findings. I'm sure many of you in this room remember the New Hope Fellowship Community Fund, the one my father, Daniel Willis, helped start, the one you all gave to, for years, to help widows, and the poor, and families who needed medical help." I looked at June Gable, in the third row. Her hand was over her mouth. "I found out what happened to that fund, in the year 2010. Lorraine Willis, using her new position as trustee, began to systematically transfer that money." I opened the binder and pulled out Owen's large print flowchart. I held it up. "She moved it from the community fund to a new, private account, the Willis Family Legacy Fund." The murmuring started, a low, angry hum. "I'm sure you all remember the blessings Lorraine and her family received. The new roof, the new Lexus for Savannah, the mission trips to Hawaii, the private college tuition. Well, here they are." I held up the next page. The cross-referenced list. "Here are the dates of her blessings, and here are the exact corresponding dates of her withdrawals from your fund. Your faith didn't pay for that Lexus, Mrs. Davies. You did." "Mrs. Davies let out a small cry. "And my father," I said, my voice dropping, but the mic catching every word. "My father tried to stop her. He told the treasurer, Walter Briggs, that he was going to a lawyer to get her name off the account, and then he had a heart attack." I looked at the congregation. I'm a medic. I know what time is tissue means. My father's medical records show that when he had his heart attack, at 11 a.m. on the day of the Spring Forward fundraiser, Lorraine, she waited. She didn't call 911 for 3 hours and 40 minutes. The silence in the room was no longer shocked. It was horrified. It was sick. "She let him die," I said, my voice thick, but not with tears, with cold, hard fact. "She let him die, so he couldn't stop her, so she could keep the house and keep the money, and for 5 years, she has been telling me, and telling all of you, that he changed his will and left me with nothing." I held up the last, yellowed document. "This is my father's real will, from January 2010 The one he gave his sister. The one where he left his house and his savings. To me. The room exploded. People were standing up. Is this true, Pastor? June Gable's voice, thin but strong, cut through the noise. Is it true? All eyes turned to Caleb. He was white as a sheet. This is a family dispute. This is not the place. He's right, Lorraine shrieked. Finally finding her voice, she grabbed the lectern mic, her knuckles white. He's right. This is a lie. A vicious, hateful lie. Her voice was no longer smooth and controlled. It was a raw, terrified screech. She's a liar, Lorraine screamed, pointing at me. She's unstable. She's always been unstable. She's jealous of my Savannah. She's trying to destroy this family. She's trying to destroy our church because she has a dark, ungrateful heart. The more she screamed, the more her godly woman image dissolved, melting away to reveal the desperate, ugly thing underneath. Ask him, a man in the back yelled. Ask Walter Briggs. He's right there. He was the treasurer. Brooke, her hand steady, was already helping Walter to his feet. He was frail, shaking, but he walked slowly to the aisle. Brooke handed him a wireless mic from the sound booth. Walter's voice trembled, but the mic picked it up. It's true. All of it. She made me sign the papers. In the basement. She said it was for flexibility. I knew it was wrong. I've been a coward. I am so sorry. She ruined the fund. That was the moment, the confirmation. And I have one more witness, I said, my voice cutting through Lorraine's sobs of lies, lies. In the back row, Marcus Flynn stood up. He was 6'3" and built like a linebacker. His voice needed no microphone. My name is Marcus Flynn, he boomed. I'm a paramedic with Northline EMS. I was on the call for Daniel Willis, and I am here to tell you, as an officer of the court, that I was there. We were delayed, and I personally heard Lorraine Willis tell her daughter, "Don't you call 911 yet. It's not ready." A woman in the front row fainted. Lorraine just stared at him. She didn't have a comeback for that. She had no idea who he was. He was a piece of the outside world, a piece of the truth, and he had just destroyed her last defense. Then Brooke, who was still standing next to Walter, took the mic. Her own voice was shaking, but she was crying, tears of sheer, terrified release. And I saw it, she cried out. In 2010, I saw her take the envelope from the safe. I kept that will. I kept it all these years because I knew. I knew one day we would need the truth. The hall was in utter chaos. People were screaming at Lorraine, screaming at Caleb. A few, old guard families were trying to defend her, yelling that this was slander. But most were a sea of horrified, furious, betrayed faces. Pastor Caleb was on the stage, his hands up, pleading, "Please, please, let's have order. Let's pray." But no one was listening. The beautiful, peaceful, false world of New Hope Fellowship had just been torn in half. The patient was in full arrest. The paddles had been discharged, and the room was filled with the smoke of a burned-down lie. Lorraine was still at the lectern, but she was just sobbing. Lies. It's all lies. A broken, hollow chant. Her reign was over. The trial, by God and by her peers, had just concluded, and she had been found guilty. The fellowship hall didn't just empty, it fractured. The chaotic scene from the gratitude meeting bled into the parking lot and then, like a virus, into the town's digital bloodstream. But the immediate fallout was a small, terrified huddle on the stage. Pastor Caleb, his face the color of old oatmeal, had immediately called an emergency executive board meeting in the pastor's study. It wasn't a request. It was a panicked summons. Lorraine, no longer sobbing but vibrating with a cold, reptilian fury, was there. Savannah, who had been sitting in the back, had been pulled in, her face a mask of confused, tear-stained terror. Arthur Vance and June Gable, The two surviving members of the 2010 basement meeting were there, looking like they were about to face their own judgment. And then I walked in. "You are not welcome here, Hayden," Lorraine spat, her voice a low growl. "This is a private leadership meeting." "I'm not here as Hayden," I said, stepping aside. Jenna Klein walked in behind me, carrying her leather briefcase. She was followed by Owen McClure, the forensic accountant, who was carrying a box filled with identical white binders, the ones we had prepared. "My name is Jenna Klein," Jenna said, her voice cutting through the heavy perfumed air of the study. "I am legal counsel for Ms. Hayden Willis, the rightful executor of the estate of Daniel Willis, and I am also here as a private investigator retained by several concerned members of this congregation." Caleb looked like he was going to be sick. "Legal counsel? This is a church matter. This is a family dispute." "Pastor Ross," Jenna said, her voice dangerously calm. "What my client delivered on that stage was not a family dispute. It was the preliminary findings of a comprehensive financial and criminal investigation." Owen began placing a binder in front of every person at the table. Caleb, Arthur, June, Lorraine. "This," Jenna said, "is a courtesy copy. It contains the full ledgers from Mr. Briggs, the analysis of the fraudulent conveyance of funds from the Community Fund to the Willis Family Legacy Fund, a forensic copy of Mr. Willis's true, unfiled will, and a full analysis of the fraudulent loan used to purchase the LLC that currently holds the title to Ms. Willis's inherited property." Lorraine let out a sound like a strangled laugh. "This is an ambush. This is a conspiracy. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "And her delinquent cousin have fabricated this packet of lies to destroy me, to destroy this church." "Are these your lies, Lorraine?" Jenna asked. She pulled a single document from her own binder and slid it across the table so it stopped directly in front of Lorraine. It was the signature page for the Willis Ridge Properties, LLC Incorporation. "Is that your signature?" Jenna asked. Lorraine stared at it. "Is this your signature?" Jenna continued, sliding another paper. "On the loan application, collateralizing $700,000 of the church's money for your personal mortgage?" Lorraine didn't speak. Her throat worked, but no sound came out. She was, for the first time in her life, silent. "That's what I thought," Jenna said. She turned to Caleb. "Pastor Ross, this binder is your copy. A full, identical copy is being delivered by messenger to the district attorney's office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., with a formal request to open a criminal investigation into racketeering, embezzlement, and wire fraud." That was when the alliances shattered. "Now, wait just a minute," Caleb said, standing up, his pastoral warmth replaced by a slick, terrified anger. "I will not have the good name of New Hope dragged into this. I am a spiritual leader. I lead the flock, the temporal matters, the finances, that was always handled by the finance committee, by Mrs. Willis." He pointed at Lorraine. He was cutting her loose, throwing her off the boat to save himself. "Lorraine had full autonomy," he said, his voice rising, pitching to the rest of the board. "I trusted her. We all trusted her." Arthur Vance, the old deacon, was shaking. "She told us it was to honor Daniel. She told us it was just a restructuring. We didn't know about the house." Lorraine stared at them, her allies, her enablers, her spiritual shields, all turning on her. Her face was a terrifying, bloodless mask. "The board," Jenna said, "has a choice. You can be investigated as co-conspirators, or you can cooperate as victims. I suggest you start by removing the person who did this." Caleb didn't hesitate. "Lorraine, given the shocking nature of these allegations, the board must ask you to be suspended from all duties, all committees, all teaching, pending a full investigation." It was the kill shot, not the legal threat, not the loss of money, but this. She wasn't just losing her house. She was losing her identity, her crown, her stage, her entire sense of self, which was built on the applause and deference of these people, was just revoked. She stood up slowly. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked at me. It was a look of such pure, undiluted hatred that it was almost cleansing. I had finally seen the truth. "You," she whispered, you will burn for this." She turned and walked out of the study. The slam of the door echoed down the hall. The fallout was immediate. Maple Ridge is a small town, but its social media footprint is vicious. The Maple Ridge Moms Facebook group, the Town Talk forum, they exploded. Someone had, of course, filmed my speech. Not the whole thing, but the key parts. The napkin, the 911 call, Marcus's testimony. By noon the next day, the story was everywhere, and the dam of silence broke. It was no longer just my story, it was everyone's. Anonymous posts, at first, then people posting under their own names. I went to New Hope in 2017. I had just lost my job. My car was repossessed. I asked Lorraine if the community fund could help me just get to interviews. She told me my problem was a lack of faith and that I should tithe more. My husband died in 2019. We were founding members. Lorraine Willis came to our house, ate our casserole, and told me the fund was reserved for spiritual emergencies, not financial mismanagement. She told my son, who was struggling with addiction, that he couldn't be part of the youth group because he wasn't a good look. The trickle became a flood. Decades of small, cruel slights, of spiritual abuse, of financial refusals, all bubbled to the surface. It wasn't just my story. I had just been the one to finally turn on the light. The chain reaction spread. Savannah, who had built a small, obnoxious brand as a Christian lifestyle influencer, was the next to fall. She posted a tearful, shaky video about family struggles and praying for grace. The comments were brutal. "Is this the Lexus your mom stole from the church? Girl, your blessings were bought with money meant for poor people. Sit down." The ethical coffee brand she partnered with, the faith-based makeup line, they were deluged. By the end of the day, 2 of her 3 partnerships had publicly terminated their contracts, citing a mismatch of values. The biggest twist, however, came from inside the church. Pastor Caleb, in a full-blown panic to save himself and the institution, called Jenna's office. He offered to cooperate. Fully. Jenna and I met him in his office, the same study, now smelling of fear. I want to make this right," he said, not meeting my eyes. I found some older documents from the 2010 transition. I think you should have them." He pushed a file across his desk. It wasn't copies. It was the original draft of the 2010 basement meeting, and in the handwritten notes in the margins, in what looked like Caleb's predecessor's handwriting, was the smoking gun. Merger of funds to provide financial flexibility for leadership family. Per L. Allows for agile response, wash out full board oversight. Sensitive. Keep in private file. He gave us everything. Emails, donor lists, the secret pastor's discretionary fund that Lorraine had used as her personal slush pile. He was, as Jenna had predicted, throwing her completely under the bus to keep the bus running. The next day, the district attorney's office held a press conference. They weren't just investigating, they were acting. A formal investigation was opened. Lorraine Willis was officially summoned for questioning. That afternoon, I drove past the house on Willow Crest Drive. My house. There were 2 news vans parked on the street. A local reporter was doing a live stand-up on the perfectly manicured lawn, the Willis Ridge Properties sign invisible to the naked eye. Neighbors, the same ones who had smiled at Lorraine for 20 years, were peeking through their blinds, a mixture of horror and, I suspect, delicious, satisfied curiosity. The dominoes kept falling. My aunt, my father's sister, called me from Arizona. She was weeping, a gasping, wet series of sobs. "Hayden, I'm just seeing it. Your cousin sent me the video. Oh, God. Hayden, I'm so sorry. I I believed her. She told me you were troubled. She told me you were angry at your dad. I I believed her. I'm so sorry, baby. I never I never stood up for you. Whatever you need. Whatever. I'll I'll fly out. I'll tell them what Daniel told me. I'll testify. I'll do anything. I thanked her and hung up. The only real, immediate blowback hit Brooke. She was fired from her part-time bookkeeping job at a local boutique. The owner was one of Lorraine's closest friends, a front row at church woman. The text was simple. Your services are no longer required. It was a punishment, a warning. Brooke called me, crying, not with fear, but with rage. That bitch! She can't shut me up! I know, I said. I was already dialing a number. But you need to work. Are you any good with engines? The owner of Redline Auto and Rescue, a garage that services our rigs. He owes me about a dozen favors. He's looking for a new office manager. He doesn't go to church. She laughed through her tears. Yeah, I can do that. I was not just fighting a legal battle. I was rebuilding a life. Jenna called me in for a meeting. Her face was all business. Okay. Hayden, she said. Phase 1 is complete. You deployed the shock. Now, Phase 2, the pushback. Lorraine has hired a lawyer, a shark from Cleveland. They are not going to fight the money. They can't. They are going to fight you. What do you mean? They are going to paint you as an unstable, hysterical, vengeful daughter. They're going to pull your work records, your psych evals. They're going to talk about every late-night shift, every stressful call. They'll say you have PTSD, that you're erratic. They will try to assassinate your character so thoroughly that a jury won't believe you. Even if you show them a videotape of Lorraine robbing a bank, you need to be ready. I felt the old, cold dread. So, she's going to win. She's just going to blame me again. Not if you're prepared, Jenna said, her voice softening. She slid a business card across the desk. Dr. Elise Monroe. She's a therapist. She specializes in trauma and high-stress professions. I send all my toughest clients to her. You're not just fighting a legal case. Hayden, you're in a psychological war. You need to protect your own head. My first instinct was to refuse, to say I was fine, the way I'd been saying I was fine for 30 years. But I was tired, and I was smart enough to know that Jenna was right. My first session with Dr. Monroe was 2 days later. She was a calm, older black woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. So, she said, you've just successfully blown up your entire life, for a very good reason. How does that feel? It feels, I said, my voice surprisingly small, like I'm waiting for the other boot to drop, waiting for her to find a way to make this all my fault. I told her about the beating, about my father, about the long-sleeve shirts to hide the bruises, not just from Lorraine, but from my patients. I'm terrified, I admitted, the first time I had said that word out loud. I'm not afraid of losing the house or the money. I'm afraid that she's going to stand up in court and in the church, and she's going to convince everyone, even me, that I'm the crazy one, that I'm the problem. She's done it my whole life. She's so good at it. Elise listened. She just listened. When I was done, she leaned forward. Hayden, she said, let's reassess your diagnosis. For 30 years, you've been a single-person response team, trying to treat an entire community's pathology. With no equipment and no backup, you're not just fighting for yourself anymore. She ticked off her fingers. You have your cousin, Brooke, your colleague, Marcus, your lawyer, Jenna, your accountant, Owen, your treasurer, Walter, your aunt. You have an entire Facebook group of victims. You haven't just built a case, you've built an army. You're not a lone responder. Hayden, you're the incident commander. I let that sink in. She was right. This wasn't me, alone in the choir room. I had a new community, a real one. I left her office. The air felt different, colder, sharper. My phone buzzed. A formal email from the county court. You are hereby summoned to appear. It was a pre-trial hearing. The first one. I looked at the printed date on the screen. I felt the familiar jolt, the one I get when the tones drop at the station. The call for a major incident, but for the first time in my life, it wasn't fear, it wasn't panic. It was a cold, sharp, and profound calm. It was the feeling I get when I've checked my rig. All my supplies are in order. The patient is identified, and I've got my gloves on. I was ready. This wasn't a beating. This was a procedure, and I was ready to make the first cut. The week before the preliminary hearing, the first countermove came. It wasn't a public statement. It was a private, strategic attack. You got a call, Jenna said, her voice flat over the phone. From Lorraine's new lawyer, the Cleveland Shark. He wants to make a deal. A deal? I said, from the front seat of my parked ambulance. A global settlement. You, Hayden, drop your civil suit regarding the will and the estate. In exchange, Lorraine will voluntarily make a significant, good-faith donation to the New Hope Fellowship to rebalance the community fund. She will also agree, in writing, to permanently step down from all financial and leadership roles at the church. I was silent, listening to the static on the line. Jenna, I said, he's offering to give back some of the money she stole and promising to stop stealing more? That's the shape of it, Jenna said. Hayden, I am your lawyer, and I am obligated to tell you what this offer means. It's the fast route. It's the clean route. You sign this, the civil case goes away. The house is probably lost, but you get a check, a quiet check. No trial, no cross-examination, no digging into your past. It's less tiring. Less tiring. I looked down at my hands on the steering wheel, the hands that had done compressions for 9 minutes straight on Mr. Henderson. I thought of the bruises on my arms, the ones I had to cover up. I thought of every Christmas I wasn't invited, every Sunday lunch I was ruining. This deal, this settlement, it was an envelope of hush money. It would let Lorraine sidestep all public accountability. She would still be seen as a troubled, but ultimately generous woman who made things right. It would keep the entire power structure, the one that said she had the right to hit me, and I had the duty to be silent, perfectly intact. No, I said. Hayden, think about it. No, absolutely not. I'm not tired. Jenna, I'm just getting started. Tell him no. He'll be back with something else, she warned. Let him. The Shark's professional, bloodless offer failed. So, 2 days later, Lorraine tried her own. I was clearing my email when it popped up. The sender name, Lorraine Willis, made my stomach clench. The subject line, family. I opened it. It was a long, rambling, 2,000-word email. It was a masterpiece of emotional gaslighting. My dearest Hayden, it began. My heart is broken. I am writing this as your mother, not as the woman you have painted me to be. I am praying for your soul. Hayden, I am praying that God removes the anger and the bitterness that has taken root in your heart. She talked about the good years. She had attached photos. Me, at 12, on the swing set in the backyard. Me, Brooke, and Savannah at a Thanksgiving. All in awkward. Matching sweaters. Lorraine, my father, and me, at his 50th birthday. Him looking so tired. Her arm draped around him, beaming. We were a family. Hayden, I took you in. I loved you. I gave you a home when you had none. Does that mean nothing to you? We were never perfect, but we were a family, and you are trying to tear your own family apart in front of the whole world. Is this what your mother would have wanted? I felt the old familiar bile rise in my throat, the shame, the guilt, the immediate, reflexive urge to apologize. And then I got to the last paragraph. It was a masterstroke of subtle, venomous threat. I know you've been under a lot of stress. Hayden, your job, it's so demanding. I know you've had your own struggles. I've always protected you, always kept your secrets. I remember that awful, awful time when you were just 19 at the community college. That terrible call you were on. The one where the family tried to sue you? I was the one who spoke to the college. I was the one who told them you were a good girl, who was just overwhelmed. If you continue this crusade, all of these old painful things will be dragged out, for everyone to see. Is that what you want? Please, Hayden, stop this. For your father's memory, for the family, just stop. I was shaking. I remembered that call, a multi-car pileup, a patient I couldn't save. The family, in their grief, had come after everyone, the hospital, the fire department, and me, the green EMT trainee. It had been hell. I had been fully investigated and completely cleared of any wrongdoing, but it had nearly broken me, and she was holding that old, healed wound and threatening to rip it open on a witness stand. I called Jenna, my voice high. She's threatening me. I read her the email. When I was done, Jenna was silent for a beat. Then she let out a short, harsh laugh. Hayden, she said, she's not threatening you. She's terrified of you. This isn't a power move. This is a Hail Mary. This is the act of a desperate, cornered animal. She's using the oldest trick in the abuser's playbook. You are damaged, and I am the only one who has ever protected you. She's trying to activate your old fear. It's working, I whispered. I know. So let's review the facts. You were investigated for that incident, and you were 100% cleared. It's a non-issue. If her lawyer brings it up, I will have it thrown out and I will make him look like a monster for attacking a first responder. She has nothing. Hayden, this email. This is just her trying to get back inside your head. Don't let her. I deleted the email, but the shaking didn't stop. That night, Brooke came over. She looked electric. Okay, she said, skipping any greeting. You are not going to believe this. I'm not in the mood. Brooke, I got an email from her. This will put you in the mood, she said. You know all those old boxes of my mom's I'm still sorting? The ones with the cassette tapes and the ancient cell phones? Yeah. I found her really old phone, from, 2007, a heavy, old brick, and I found the charger, and I turned it on, and, hey, I found an old voicemail, from Lorraine, from when you were applying to colleges. She held up the phone, her face a mask of pure, vindicated fury. She was bragging. Hayden, bragging to my mom about how she'd handled your college situation. She pressed a button. The audio quality was terrible. A tinny, compressed sound. But the voice was unmistakable. It was Lorraine, bubbly and triumphant. And can you believe the nerve? Engineering. Like she's some kind of genius. So I just told Daniel, honey, that's just not who she is. It's not a good fit for her talents. So I found this wonderful little program at the community college. The cheap EMT one. Honestly, it's perfect. She gets to play with her little first aid kit, and we save, I don't know, $100,000 in tuition? That's a lot of money we can put towards Savannah's education. It's God's provision, isn't it? The message ended. I just stared at the phone. The cheap EMT one, so we can put it towards Savannah's education. She hadn't just guided me. She hadn't just suggested. She had actively, deliberately sabotaged my first-choice career to divert the funds to her own child. She didn't just push me, Brooke, I whispered. She stole that, too. Yeah, Brooke said. And I sent the audio file to Jenna. It's all part of the moral character picture. 2 days later, the other boot dropped. My aunt, my father's sister, flew in from Arizona. She called me from her hotel. Hayden, I brought something your father gave me, right after he signed that will, the one you have. I met her in the hotel lobby. She was older, thinner, her face a map of grief and regret. I am so sorry, child, she said, just holding my hands. You're here now, I said. He gave this to me, she said, pulling a small, tarnished silver box from her purse. It was a little jewelry box. He gave it to me right before I moved. He said, Mary, I want you to hold on to this. Don't, don't tell Lorraine. It's just in case Hayden ever needs to know the truth. She pressed it into my hand. I put it in my own safe deposit box, and I forgot about it, honey, until all this. I'm so sorry. I opened the box. Inside, there was no jewelry, just a single piece of folded, heavy cream-colored stationery. I recognized the letterhead from my father's old desk. I unfolded it. The handwriting was his, that familiar, slightly too neat cursive. It was dated January 2010, the same week as the will. My dearest Hayden, if you are reading this, it means I have failed. It means I was not strong enough to protect you from Lorraine. I see what she is. I see how she treats you. I see how she wants to build a life for herself and Savannah. And I see how she is using us, using the church, to do it. I have been a coward. I have tried to fix it. I have made a new will. It leaves you the house and the savings. It is what your mother would have wanted. It is what I want. But I am afraid of her. I am afraid of her anger. She controls everything. I am writing this to you, my daughter, to tell you that you are not what she says you are. You are bright and strong and good, and I am so sorry that I let my own weakness put you in harm's way. I am giving this to your Aunt Mary. If I cannot find the courage to fix this while I am alive, then I pray this letter gives you the strength to fix it when I am gone. I was wrong to let her decide everything. I was wrong. Please, please be free. Love, Dad. I sat down, hard, on the hotel lobby chair. I was not crying. I was hollow. He knew. He knew everything. He saw it all. He knew she was a thief. He knew she was a liar, and he was too weak, too scared, to stop her. He had been weak, but he had, in this one, final, secret act, tried to stand up for me. He had tried to give me the truth, and Lorraine, with her delayed 911 call, had done everything in her power to make sure this letter, and the will it represented, never saw the light of day. Jenna read the letter in her office. She, for the first time, looked truly, emotionally angry. "This is not a will," she said, her voice tight. "But in a civil case? This is a nuclear bomb. This establishes his intent. It establishes his state of mind. It corroborates Walter's story. It proves, in his own hand, that he was terrified of her, and that he wanted you to have the house. This just added a lot of zeros to our moral damages claim." The final piece of the puzzle came, as expected, from Savannah. She texted me, not a call, a text. "Can we meet? Alone? No lawyers. Please, Hayden, it's about Mom." I agreed. I met her at a Starbucks on the highway, far from town, and I put the digital recorder in my pocket, on. She looked terrible. Her influencer glow was gone. She was pale. Her eyes were red, and she was wearing a baseball cap. "You have to stop this," she said, before I had even sat down. Her voice was a low, desperate whine. "Stop what, Savannah?" "This, all of it. You don't understand the pressure she's under. You don't know what it's like. You're ruining us. She stole my inheritance, Savannah. She stole from the church. She was just managing it," Savannah cried. And the house, that's my home. The brands, they're dropping me. Hayden, I'm losing my followers." That was it. Not the moral horror, not the embezzlement. She was terrified of losing her followers. "What do you want, Savannah?" She leaned in, her eyes darting around. "Look, if you stop this, if you tell the DA you were mistaken, that it was a grief reaction, I can talk to Mom. I can get her to give you a part of the house. I can get her to give you some money, to make this right. Just buy your silence." She was offering me a bribe, a payoff. "I am an EMT. Savannah," I said. my voice as cold and steady as a steel rail. I know the value of timely intervention, what your mother did to my father, and what she did to that fund. You can't fix that with an envelope. It's too late. I started to stand up. You don't get it, she said, her voice rising to a shriek, grabbing my arm. She was just trying to keep everything nice. Even with your dad. She was just trying to keep the service from being ruined. She was just trying to protect the moment. I stopped. I turned back. What did you just say? That day, she said, and the words tumbled out. The final, stupid, unconscious confession. With your dad, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like you said. She said to wait. She said to wait until the offering song was over. To not interrupt the service. That's all. It was just bad timing. I just stared at her. She said to wait until the offering song was over, so it wouldn't interrupt the service. Marcus's testimony. Don't you call 911 yet. It's not ready. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't panic. It was a conscious, strategic, theatrical decision. She had weighed her husband's life against a good performance, and the performance had won. I reached into my pocket and, very deliberately, hit the stop button on the recorder. Thank you, Savannah, I said. You've been very helpful. I walked out. I got in my car. I sat for a full minute. Then I forwarded the audio file, titled Savannah Confession, MP3, to Jenna and Owen. Owen replied 3 minutes later, Holy shit. Jenna replied, The game is over. They just don't know it yet. I got home. I opened my laptop. I saw the unread email from Lorraine's lawyer, the one with the settlement offer, still sitting in my inbox. I thought about the quiet check, the less tiring route. I clicked the email. I clicked delete. I looked at the printed summons, the date of the hearing, taped to my monitor. This wasn't going to end in a dark, quiet room with a handshake and a non-disclosure agreement. This was going to end in the brightest, most public room I could find. It was going to end under oath. It was going to end in the light. The county courthouse for the preliminary hearing was not grand. It was a small, suffocating room, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee, built in the 1970s. But it was packed. Every seat was taken. Members of the church, my aunt, Walter Briggs in his best, ill-fitting suit, and 2 reporters from the Maple Ridge Gazette. Lorraine's reputation, once her impenetrable shield, had now become her biggest liability. It made the story newsworthy. Lorraine was there, at the defense table with her Cleveland shark. She was in a modest navy blue dress, her hair pulled back. She was attempting to look humble, victimized, but I saw her hands, clenched on the table. She looked like a viper in a shoebox. I sat on the other side with Jenna. I felt calm. I felt ready. The assistant district attorney, a young, ambitious woman, spoke first. She laid out the criminal case. Your Honor, the state will show a pattern of behavior, a systemic, 15-year scheme to defraud a charitable organization. We will show evidence of embezzlement, wire fraud, and a breach of fiduciary duty so profound it borders on racketeering. She mentioned my father's death, not as a charge, but as context. And we will show that this scheme was protected, at all costs, even when a human life was on the line. Then Jenna stood for the civil matter, which was being heard concurrently. Your Honor, we are here to motion for 2 things. First, to recognize the last will and testament of Daniel Willis, dated January 2010, as the primary and valid will of the deceased, given that no other will was ever legally filed. And second, to issue an immediate injunction, freezing all assets of the Willis Family Legacy Fund and the LLC Willis Ridge Properties, as we will prove they were founded and funded entirely with stolen and fraudulently conveyed assets belonging to my client and to the New Hope Fellowship. Lorraine's lawyer was slick. He stood up, all polish and confidence. Your Honor, this is a tragedy, but it's a family tragedy. What you are seeing is a bitter, emotionally unstable young woman, an EMT, a high-stress job, as you can imagine, who is attempting to destroy her loving stepmother's reputation after a simple, personal disagreement. This is a vendetta, not a lawsuit. She is unwell, and we will prove that her evidence is nothing but the fantasy of a troubled mind, jealous of her more successful sister. Jenna just smiled. We're happy to move on to the evidence. Your Honor, the fantasy seems to have a lot of signatures on it. Jenna didn't call me first. She called Marcus. He walked up, in his uniform, looking like he owned the room. He took the oath. Jenna's questions were simple. Paramedic Flynn, you were on the call for Daniel Willis on April 12th, 5 years ago? Yes, ma'am. Describe the scene. We were dispatched for a possible unconscious. We arrived at a home, a party, food everywhere. We were delayed at the door. The patient was on a sofa. He was cold to the touch. He had been down a significant amount of time. Lividity was setting in. In your professional opinion, paramedic, how long had he been down? A long time. An hour, minimum, probably more. The defense will claim the family was in a panic, that they didn't know what to do. Is that what you saw? No, ma'am. I saw a party scene. I saw composure, not panic. And did you, at any point, hear a conversation between Mrs. Willis and her daughter, Savannah? Objection, the shark yelled. Hearsay. Goes to the defendant's state of mind, Your Honor, Jenna said smoothly, and the panic defense. I'll allow it, the judge said. Answer the question. Paramedic. Marcus looked directly at Lorraine. Yes, ma'am. I heard the daughter ask why they hadn't called. I heard Mrs. Willis tell her, Don't you call 911 yet. It's not ready. A wave of sickness passed through the courtroom. The shark tried to cross-examine him, tried to paint him as my work boyfriend, tried to say he was lying for me. Marcus just stared at him. Sir, I've been a paramedic for 15 years. I am a sworn officer. I am here under oath. I am not her work boyfriend. I am the man who pronounced her father dead, while his wife was worried about not being ready. That is a scene you do not forget. He was dismissed. Jenna called Walter Briggs. He was shaking, a frail old man, and his testimony was devastating. He told the story of the basement meeting, the pressure, the agile response lie. He wept on the stand. She told us it was to honor Daniel, and I've carried this sin for 15 years. I'm so sorry. I knew it was wrong. The shark didn't even cross-examine him. He just waved his hand. No questions for this, confused old man. Then, Jenna called Savannah Willis. This was the moment. Lorraine's lawyer sat up, smiling. This was his witness. He expected Savannah to defend her mother, to cry, to talk about how unstable I was. Savannah walked up, pale, in a black dress, looking like a professional mourner. Jenna was gentle. Ms. Willis, you love your mother, don't you? Yes, Savannah whispered. And you believe she was just trying to do what was best for the church? Yes, always. And on the day your stepfather died, it was just a chaotic, terrible day, wasn't it? Your mother, she was just in a panic? Yes, Savannah said, her voice rising, finally finding her script. She was terrified. She was praying. Hayden is twisting it. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like what Ms. Willis? Jenna asked, her voice soft. Wasn't like a conscious decision? No, she wanted to wait. It was just bad timing. Bad timing, Jenna repeated. That's an interesting phrase, Your Honor. We'd like to play a short audio file from a conversation I had with Ms. Willis. Oh, I'm sorry. That my client had a conversation Ms. Willis sought out. The shark jumped up. Objection. Illegal recording. Improper foundation. One-party consent state, Your Honor, Jenna said, and she's just authenticated her own voice. It's impeachment. Play it, the judge said. Jenna hit the button. The courtroom was dead silent. And then, Savannah's high, reedy, whining voice filled the room. She said to wait. She said to wait until the offering song was over. To not interrupt the service. That's all. It was just bad timing. The silence that followed was absolute. Savannah's face was white. She looked at her mother. Lorraine broke. It wasn't a crack. It was a shatter. The mask of the humble, pious victim exploded. "No!" she shrieked, a sound so animal and so raw it made the bailiff jump. She stood up, knocking her chair over. "She is a snake!" Lorraine screamed, her arm stabbing out, finger pointing at me. "She's a liar! She tricked her! A lying, vengeful, ungrateful runt!" "Mrs. Willis," her lawyer said, trying to grab her arm. You're Pharisees," she screamed at the courtroom. "You're judging me? A woman of God? A woman who gave her life, who built that church. God knows my heart. God knows my heart." She was babbling, mixing languages, her face a purple, contorted mask of pure, unadulterated rage. She poisoned her father against me. She has always been a sick girl. She is a snake who ate the goodness of my family. "Order!" the judge yelled, slamming his gavel. "Mrs. Willis, you will sit down. Bailiff?" It was too late. The show was over. The image that Lorraine Willis had spent 30 years curating, the image of the serene, holy, perfect Christian mother. She had just immolated it on the stand, in front of God and everyone. It wasn't me who tore her down. It was her own panic, her own unfiltered, murderous rage. She was forced to sit, sobbing, hysterical. "Jenna," the judge said, his voice tight, "call your next witness." "We call Hayden Willis," Jenna said. I walked up. I sat in the same chair. I took the oath. I did not look at Lorraine. I looked at the judge. I looked at the jury box, even though there was no jury. I looked at the people. Jenna just had one question. "Ms. Willis, please tell the court, in your own words, what you found, from the beginning." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't perform. I reported. "I am an EMT," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I report on what I see. On Sunday, October 21st, I was physically assaulted by my stepmother in a choir room. She gave me these bruises. A cousin gave me a paper napkin with a note. The note led me to my father's will, which she had suppressed. It led me to a forensic accountant. It led me to Walter Briggs. It led me to her shell corporation. It led me to the bank statements. I laid it out, piece by piece, no emotion, no embellishment, just the facts, the dates, the numbers, the lies. I laid out the chain of events, from that first punch to the audio file of Savannah. It was a trauma report, a full, detailed, undeniable patient history. When I was finished, I just sat there. The shark, looking shaken, tried. "Ms. Willis, you hate her, don't you?" "I don't. This isn't about my feelings. This is about the facts. You did all this investigation, for money, for a house?" "I did this," I said, and for the first time, I looked at him. Because the facts showed a crime, the way I would report a crime if I saw it on a call. "You wanted to hurt her," he yelled. And I turned, then, and looked at the jury box, at the people, at June Gable, at Mrs. Davies. "If she had only hurt me," I said, my voice clear and final. "I might have let it go. I've been letting it go for 30 years. But she didn't just hurt me. She used God's name. She used this town's trust. She used the faith of everyone in this room to build a castle for herself. She stole from the poor, and my father died. He died while they were calculating a convenient time to call 911. This is not a family matter anymore. It's a public safety matter." I was done. The judge called a recess. It was short. When he came back, his face was stone. He issued his ruling. On the criminal matter, he said, I find there is overwhelming probable cause to move this case to a full trial. The evidence of financial crimes is extensive. On the civil matter, he continued, I am granting the plaintiff's request. I am recognizing the will of January 2010 as the primary document of intent. I am issuing an immediate injunction, freezing all accounts of the Willis Family Legacy Fund and the LLC Willis Ridge Properties. The house on Willowcrest Drive is hereby placed in receivership, pending a full and final distribution of the estate, which now seems to be Ms. Hayden Willis's. It was a total clinical victory. Lorraine was facing prison. She was facing the loss of the house. She was facing the loss of every single dollar she had stolen. Savannah was facing a life where she would have to get a job. Jenna and I stood up. Lorraine was just sitting, staring. Her shark was packing his bag. It was over. One more thing, Your Honor, Jenna said. The judge looked annoyed. Ms. Klein? My client requests a permanent restraining order, barring Lorraine Willis from her home, her place of work, and from any and all contact. The judge looked at me. He looked at Lorraine. He looked at the bruise, now just a faint, yellow shadow on my cheek. Granted, he said. 100 yards. It was the final boundary, the one I had never been able to build, the one that was now built by law, not just by my own shaky hands. I did not go out to celebrate. There was no champagne, no victory lap. I finished my shift the next day, and I drove to the garage I rented, the one attached to the Red Line Auto and Rescue, where Brooke was now running the front office. She was there, with Marcus. They had pizza, in a cardboard box, and a 2-liter of soda. A few of the others from the church, June Gable, Mrs. Davies, showed up, the ones who had been wronged. We ate off paper plates. We didn't talk about the trial. We talked about Marcus's kid, about the weird call I'd had that morning, about the terrible music Brooke was playing. It was easy. It was the first Sunday lunch I'd ever had that felt like family. Later that night, alone in the small apartment above the garage, I unpacked a box. I had a new, small plaque. I hung it on the wall, in memory of Daniel Willis. Your daughter finally got you out of that house. I reached into my pocket. I had been carrying it for weeks. The original napkin. It was crumpled, stained with my sweat and my blood from that day. The writing was faded. Safety deposit box 214. Ask me about 2010. I had bought a small, cheap frame. I unfolded the napkin, smoothed it out, and placed it inside. I put it on my desk. Not a trophy, a reminder that sometimes an entire life can be saved. You just need one person to hand you the right tool at the right time. I stepped out onto the small balcony. It was cold, miles away. Across the sleeping town, I could see the white, illuminated steeple of New Hope Fellowship. It looked small and insignificant. I didn't feel anything. Not anger, not fear, not even longing. That old, desperate ache to be invited inside, to be called daughter. It was just a building. I felt a profound, quiet, and bone-deep sense of relief. The sense I get when I finally stabilized a critical patient. The bleeding is stopped, the vitals are steady, and I've handed them off to the hospital. The call was over. My tour was done. I went back inside, and I closed the door. Shutting out the steeple, shutting out the past, I locked it. And for the first time in my life, I was home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so glad I could share it with you. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. And if you want to support more stories like this, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel. Like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.